Well, for those of you in the room and those of you joining us online, welcome to this quarter's parent tea. Today I want to talk about standardized test scores and make sure that people understand those scores and how universities look at them. Yeah, my text isn't really big. If you want to come forward, you can. Feel free to move forward. The first test I want to start with is the PSAT, or in practice, SAT. The purpose of this test is for just having the students get the testing experience and SAT preparation. When the students receive their PSAT scores, they will receive a report that gives them some areas where they might want to work or where they need some improvement. I also want to recommend Khan Academy is a great resource. It is free and it has great SAT prep materials. There are actually practice tests on Khan Academy, and as they take the tests, when they get their results, Khan Academy actually gives them suggestions on areas they need to improve and then points them to the resources on Khan Academy where they can study and prepare for the test. So Khan Academy is a great resource and SAT practice and prep. Okay. So the range for the PSAT is up to 1520. Reading and math, there's no more essay on the PSAT or SAT like there was maybe when people like me took the test. And people always they're asking, like, okay, what is a good score on a PSAT? Well, it's when you get the results, it's going to give you it's going to correspond with the SAT. It's going to tell you where the students score on the PSAT ranks with their potential scores for the SAT. And really, for universities, there's really no expectation with the PSAT. It is a practice test. They do not want to receive the PSAT scores. So really, this is just for our school use and students' practice for the SAT and preparation for the SAT. Yeah. So when they get their score reports, it looks something like this. It's actually 2 pages. The second page, like I said, is a breakdown of the areas where they may want to improve and gives them suggestions on how to study and prepare for the test. And we give the test in October, and so it's about mid-October. We actually have, it's a testing window, actually. SAT tests are on specific days, on Saturdays. But as a school, we can decide when in October is the best time to schedule the PSAT, and then we pick a day and give it to them. So October testing means they're going to get their test results in about December, and then we can give those to the students. They are also they should be able to see their PSAT scores and their SAT scores on their own College Board account. All high schoolers should have a College Board account, and they can see their own test scores. So sometime in December, those scores should also be on their personal College Board accounts. Now, for students who are taking PSAT in grade 11, they can qualify for recognition from the National Merit Scholars Program. Now, any student at our school who's taking the PSAT can get recognized for achieving a high score on the PSAT. And their names are put in a registry, and they're recognized. So that's anyone who takes the test. Now, for U.S. citizens, or U.S. passport holders, there can then be some college, application benefits to that. The students can claim that they are a National Merit Scholar. They're recognized by that organization. So they can write that in their essays, and that can also lead to possible scholarship opportunities and things like that. Okay? So the scores can be beneficial to them. Okay? Now, ninth graders It's not recommended, it's not highly recommended that a ninth grader takes the PSAT, because the PSAT that we give is, like I said, the 11th grade like National Merit Scholar level test. And so where the ninth graders are probably going to be the most, I don't want to say disadvantaged, but they haven't had a lot of the higher maths. Their English might be great, but it's the mathematics where ninth graders are going to experience math on the PSAT that they haven't learned yet. And so for some students, that's the math portion is quite frustrating for them. But again, it's a learning experience. They get their score and they see where they need to improve. Yeah, it's in 10th and 11th grade where the PSAT is more beneficial, and because they have had more math in high school, they've had more reading and writing experience in high school, and so it just makes sense that these 10th and 11th graders have the potential to score higher. Again, ninth graders can take it, but ninth graders are going to have to pay, the family will have to pay for the testing fee. It's not much at all. I think this year, I think it was about 600 NT. So it's not super expensive, but yeah, because it's optional for ninth graders, families take care of the fee, and they can take that with the 10th and 11th graders. This year, for example, I think there were about 9 ninth graders who chose to take the PSAT. Okay, the SAT. The SAT is the standardized test that the students are taking. It's recognized around the world, mostly U.S. universities, but international schools or schools around the world recognize and understand the SAT scores, and so those can be used to apply to colleges all over the world. And so the SAT is something that the students have to register for that on their own. Like I said, the school gives the PSAT. I register everyone for PSAT. SAT, the students will go onto their College Board account and they will research, what date and what location do I want to take the SAT, and they register on their own for the SAT. Now, the score range increases a little bit for the actual test. It goes up to 1600, and again, people ask, well, what's a good score? Well, I tell students and parents, it really depends on what is your college and university goals. Usually 1100 to 1200 is a decent score. It tells universities that those students are college ready. They can handle that level of work. But as universities and admissions gets more competitive, then scores up into the 1300 range or 1400 to 1600 for very competitive schools. So it depends on the students and the parents' goal, where would they like to apply to college. Now, I tell students in their college lists, I tell them, have dream schools, and then have what we call target schools, which means your academic performance and your test scores are really good for that school. It may be competitive, but you're within that range. It's a target school. And then I do tell them, do include some schools in your college list that are what we call safety schools, where their admission requirement is a little bit lower. And it would be easier to be admitted into that school. So that is the SAT. Now, for a while with COVID, many schools became SAT optional. You don't have to take the SAT, or you don't have to send your scores. Now we are seeing now that many universities, they're since we're years past COVID, they are transitioning back to wanting an SAT test score if it's at all possible. But other schools, other universities, they said, well, we went test optional, and we were able to do our admission process without the SAT. So they've just decided to continue with that. So universities are kind of deciding now, are we going to remain test optional, no SATs, or are we going to go back to requiring the SAT? So it's very important that students and parents are looking at the admission requirements for universities to make sure, does the school require an SAT? Also, I want to mention some schools do what they call super scoring. So for example, you can see in these two examples where this student tested a few times and they got a high reading score here. And in the math score, you see the math score is higher in the first test, but the reading score is higher in the second test. So some universities will say, okay, if you're willing to present both tests, we will take the high reading and the high math and we'll give you the high score. And so if a school does that, I highly recommend that a student sends both of their test scores and gets it super scored. That's to their advantage. Sometimes students, they think, well, I have to take the test again and again until I get my highest score, and then I will send it. Well, but if you have two tests that have decent scores, then go ahead and send it and let that university super score it. Yeah. And I do want to emphasize here, students and counselors, you can't super score. So we can't do that on our own and present it to the university. The university has to be willing to do it, and on their websites they should explain, like, yes, we do the super scoring, or no, we don't. Okay. And also, when students get to a point where they are applying for universities, they need to go to their College Board account and they ask College Board to send their SAT scores to the universities. These standardized test scores, I do not, Morrison does not put those scores on our transcripts, and so the only thing I send to universities is transcripts with grades, credits, letters of recommendation. But standardized test scores, students have to request and send those scores to the universities on their own. Okay. Yeah. So SAT test, any test now that College Board gives, they use a program called Blue Book, and that program is downloaded right onto their own personal machine, and so they have to register, get Blue Book on their computer, and that means they're ready to come and take those College Board tests. Yeah. Okay. ACT. Now, ACT is a test that it's not as popular, and many people have maybe never heard of it. But ACT is very similar to the SAT, but the scoring is very different. Okay, and one thing, the major difference between the SAT and the ACT is ACT has a science STEM component to it. So when you look at the scores here, they have math and science. The SAT really just breaks down scores into math and English, right? But the ACT has math, science, and that becomes a STEM score, and then English, reading, and writing then becomes the language score for the ACT. So for students who, if they're in the sciences and they're looking at a university that accepts both the SAT or the ACT, if their focus is science and they want to demonstrate their scientific knowledge and ability, they may want to choose an ACT. Okay? Now, unfortunately, we do not have ACT testing here on our site yet. It really just hasn't really been popular with students. We haven't had enough interest to really become an ACT test site, but we are an SAT test site 3 times a year. And every year we choose to give the SAT in August, December, and March. There are other tests, but those are the ones that we give here on our campus. If there was a greater interest in the ACT, then we could look into becoming an ACT test site, but not at this point. Okay? English proficiency testing. Now, we are an American school, and we have accreditation from 2 different organizations in the United States. One is Christian, for Christian schools, ACSI, Association of Christian Schools International. The other one is WASC, or Western Association of Schools and Colleges, and they are not Christian, but they accredit schools. And actually the 2 organizations, actually they work together, so that when we are going through the process of accreditation, they actually send a team together and look at our school. So one school is looking at, or one organization, of course, is looking at everything, but ACSI, the Christian organization, is then looking at, our Bible curriculum and the atmosphere of our school. A little bit different perspective from ACSI and WASC, but they do that accreditation together. And so because we have these accreditations, many of the universities, they don't have a problem with our students' English levels. Now, especially if they have a US passport or Canadian passport, a passport where the language of that country is English, they usually do not have a problem. But there are some universities that say, well, if you have a foreign passport, like if you don't have a US passport and you're applying to the US, and you've been in school in Taiwan, well, they may say, well, we want an English test. So we need to make sure that as students and parents are looking at college admissions, we need to look at this. If you are considered an international student, we need to look for the English test requirement. Now, there are times where the student and we can write emails to those universities, and I can explain our school, and they see the transcript, they see maybe SAT scores. So there are times where the university says, okay, with these documents, we don't need this. But there are still some schools that say, well, it doesn't matter. Like right now I have a student, he's a senior, applying to a school in the United States. So he does not have a US passport. And so, yeah, this was a requirement. And even though I emailed and explained, like, well, if you look at our school website, we have a school profile page. This has all the information about our school and our curriculum, and I send that to all the universities. So even with that evidence, the school said, no, the foreign student, he must take an English test. So I want parents and students to be looking for this and be ready for it, so it doesn't surprise them. Okay. Now the TOEFL test is probably it's a better test for, say, academics or students that are at high school level. There are other tests like the IELTS and TOEIC, but these are more for the workplace or adults, and so it's a different kind of test. So most applicable to our students, if they're going to take an English test, would be the TOEFL. Yeah. But a lot of universities will accept these, and in their admission requirements they will list these, but they may say, well, we prefer this one, but these are okay. And, so every university is going to be different. So read carefully and see what the universities require. So the TOEFL test, it has the various parts. It has 4 parts: reading, listening, speaking, and writing. And then each part is scored up to 30, and so then the highest score is 120. So for this, what's a good score? A low score would be 60 to 80, 80 to 100 is kind of the average. And so many universities, they set 80 as their minimum. But really they would prefer a student to be, for the more competitive schools, they would like a score of probably 100 or above. Yeah. Yeah, these are just some examples of English proficiency requirements, like Miami of Ohio. You know, they'll say, you know, a TOEFL of 80, or on the English part of the SAT, if you have a 550 or above, then you may not need a TOEFL. Yeah. And then Columbia University, you know, they may say, well, if your primary language of instruction at school has been English, like our school, then if we can prove the curriculum and the instruction of our school, then they may say, okay, we'll waive the English requirement, the test requirement. Yeah. So there's a lot of research and a lot of reading that needs to happen. How does each university, you know, see an international student? You know, what do they accept? Yeah, and what scores do they accept? And do they take into consideration the school is an American school and we teach in English? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, this is just an example of, yeah, this is Columbia's page where that information came from. Yeah, and see there's a lot of information, but see in the fine print, the fine print, they say, you know, your primary language of instruction at school has been English for the duration of your secondary school time, like high school. Yeah, and so yeah, we need to be looking for something like that in the international requirements or in the English language proficiency requirements. Okay. So here's a timeline of the tests that we give. Like I said, the PSAT, for grade 9 it is optional, but for grades 10 and 11, we will give all of the students the PSAT here at Morrison. It's then not necessary for grade 12 because they need to be working on the SAT. Yeah, after the PSAT, I do recommend that the 11th graders go ahead and attempt an SAT. They can take it many times. For seniors, I do recommend that if they don't like their SAT score in 11, that they take the August. That's the first SAT that we have here before they start applying to universities. So I do recommend that if they want another one, that they do that. And then, like I said, English proficiency testing. I tell them, please start early researching admission requirements and register for a test if they need a TOEFL test. Okay. All right. Well, that's all I have for the standardized test portion. I do want to introduce, if we could turn the camera here. Thank you very much. I do have, this is a poster